Well, you've met me already today, and I've chatted with a few of you today, but what I am going to... It's so brilliant hearing everybody's stories, because they're so varied and different. I think that it's such a good opportunity, actually, to hear about what everyone's route to a successful business is. It's what everybody wants to hear. So my name's Louise Boylan, and I run Shoreditch Design Rooms. And I was just going to talk to you a little bit about my particular journey and where I started. I also wasn't working in a creative industry. I went to university and studied astrophysics. I didn't think I was going to become an astrophysicist, but it turned out I went off and worked in IT. And then after a while of being fed up of not really producing anything, I started to get involved in textile design. And I did that and loved it. And I keep trying to put my finger on what it was that I loved about doing textile design. And I suspect, and I see this quite a lot in quite a few of my students, it's actually something to do with touching things. Really like using my hands and touching fabrics and materials, textures. There is definitely a thing there, there's a sensory thing that goes on, and that might be, or we don't know, we could probably have a whole conversation about it, why we get switched on by upholstery. It could just be that is the click that happens for us. But anyway, there I was into textile design. I was just doing it sort of like in my off time and weekends and sort of like weeks off work, and I was starting to work with some really important textile designers and technicians, and I was like, oh yeah, this could be the avenue, and started putting a lot of pressure on myself, and then I started to get a bit of a whiff of the fashion industry, and I realised that this that I was involved in was very much to do with fashion, and anyone that knows me knows that's not my thing, and I didn't think that it was going to be quite for me. So I had to sort of rethink what it was that I wanted to do, but I still want to touch things. So I started thinking about, okay, textiles, interiors, brilliant, I can carry on designing, but I will put it on furniture instead. So it's not distinct from what I heard you saying. I'll quickly sort out the upholstery thing, learn how to do that, and then I'll start producing my own furniture, and there'll be like this massive Boylan range of furniture with my fabrics on it. So I'm still on that bit there, the quickly knocking out the upholstery bit. And I've really enjoyed the journey, really love the upholstery side of things, and hopefully my fourth career will actually come back to maybe a bit more textile design and all that kind of stuff. It's not something actually I've really explored very far. So instead I went to my local community centre and started to bash up a chair. In fact, a taxi driver gave me a set of dining chairs to upholster because he was training at the local community centre, and off we went. There I met infamous Janie, who forced the guy who taught there to take me on, and I don't know why. I know him really well, he just wouldn't take anyone on, so I've no idea why he took me on, but he did, and from that moment there I was, sweeping floors, stripping furniture. I was that ripper down, and trying to organise things like springs and other things that I was finding underneath cupboards, and think, what is this for? What are we doing with this? Just generally trying to take care of the workshop. Meanwhile, he also used to teach in the community centre, and off I would go, sort of telling people how to, take twine, or how to use scissors, or some basic things. So oddly, I've actually been teaching right from the start, teaching, how to use a ruler and things like that right from the start. At that point then, I realised I needed to get some proper training whilst I was working in this kind of apprenticeship, and it really was that kind of steady sort of apprenticeship, and where I was working from the basics. So off I went, and I joined Wendy Shorter, infamous Wendy, who has been a constant source of support, and she's a wonderful mentor and mentor to all of her students, and that's been very inspiring for me as well. At this point, when I started learning at Wendy's, I started to realise I'm now making some connections. I've got connections then with the upholsterer I was working with actually a bunch of learners from my community centre, and then someone like Wendy, and the AMU, and all of the support that they were offering. So then at this point I realised that this little bit of experience that I've had already, and I carry on working for 3 years as a apprentice, has actually enabled me. It's making me, it's just practice, and that's what I would actually really emphasise with you guys. You just need to keep practicing. But that was really helping me, and so that was informing my training, and I was finding things were just a little bit easier because I'd been exposed to things. And I also had that experience of seeing things in a workshop and just being like, no idea how we're going to get from there to here, and then just working it out. Certainly the guy I was working with, we had some really random things. He works in Shoreditch, and people would bring all kinds of things to him to work on. So just a few slides. So here was a bit of fabric that I actually had screen printed myself. And there's Michael and his amazing workshop. You can see what I mean now when I was sorting it out. So when someone said dingy, they worked in dingy work, this was it. It was one of those places where you would have to take things out onto the street so that you could kind of crack on. He fit about 8 blooming sofas into that space. I don't know how it happened. Incredibly busy, and we worked very, very long hours actually. But this is the guy, he enjoyed his work so much. And there's one of my chair frames that I was doing then with Wendy. Then it came to do a little bit of a spell at Wandsworth Prison. Once I was fully trained, I went off into industry, and I worked in a few different workshops. And then I worked full time on a bench and really did my time. And I developed now this network of old boy upholsterers. So I had this full set, pretty disparaging if I have to say. But when I went on the bench and I did my time and I slogged it out and I did my long hours, it was at that point where they were like, oh, okay, you're prepared to put your back into it. So I'd kind of earned my stripes then, and I'd taken on some learning, and I felt like, okay, I'm ready to get a space, and I'm ready to start working with some other people. And from that point, actually, I always had someone working, not always, but I had a trainee working with me, and then I had other colleagues in the field that would work with me as well. So there was always people around, and I was always bouncing ideas off other people. To support that work then, because it's such a big leap, and I do live in Shoreditch, it really is crazy expensive to rent the space, I started teaching, and I've set up a workshop at Wandsworth Prison. And that was a brilliant experience, because in a way the expectations were quite low and everything was new. So there were no upholsterers there, it was definitely behind locked doors. And so I could just kind of like cut my teeth on this workshop with these men who I was training, who really just needed that connection and needed to do when we were talking earlier about upholstery as therapy, really needs to use their hands. And it was very rewarding, particularly in the start. As time went on, there became problems actually with everything that was going on with the prison system, and it became harder and harder to deliver under the constraints. But nonetheless, the connection with the guys and getting them to make something, there was this constant dilemma between, are we making upholsterers or are we training? Is it a kind of therapy? They wanted to make upholsterers actually, and I had to kind of like set some levels that these 6 months that I might have with these guys one day for 4 hours a week might not turn them into upholsterers. at the end of it. But certainly there were guys that came out of those programs that continued on into making, and these are important things, I think, that we're putting out into the world. So there I was in my workshop. I'm still wearing those same boots today. Look at that. That maybe is one of the dynamics of working for yourself. Sorry?
I made those boots.
You made these boots? What a brilliant link.
So you like them.
There they are. Love the boots. Well, that's amazing. Let's talk later. And actually, this is the thing, and this is because I now teach, where the story's headed. What I notice is, and I spoke earlier, all of these different skills that are coming into this, not just to contribute to this conversation, but all such brilliant skills, leather workers, designers, and all astrophysicists. I can barely call myself one of those, but everyone's got something to offer. I really loved that workshop, and you must always value your times, because probably those times when you're most stressed, you are doing some brilliant things. Actually, you have to be, you're being really resourceful, and maybe you're a bit strung out, but those are the good times. I should probably remember that myself right now, as I'm sort of like going through lots and lots of changes in my work. But we should all kind of like appreciate what we're doing in the moment and know that we're all doing the very, very best that we can, for sure. Sadly, such a brilliant workshop had a mezzanine at the top there, so all of the furniture was stored up there. I literally was carrying sofas up that rickety ladder there. I mean, I did need help when I was doing that, but it was such a lovely space, and two of us could work in there actually really easily. After that then, one of my kind of like greatest sort of like things that I like to do of an afternoon was walk around the area and point at large disused buildings and be like, that would make a great school, that would make a great school. And I used to just do that all the time. It was one of my habits, and it lasted for quite a few years. It wasn't that it needed to be my school actually, as it happened. It's just that I really wanted to see a school kind of like develop in some cool space. And then I came home one Christmas from visiting family, and the building behind my house had a to let sign on it. And Julie, I thought, well, I'll just phone and see what's what. And I was still in that phase, that could make a good school. And so we went in. It was some kind of weird squat, and it had 5 fridges on one floor just dumped in there. And within a month anyway, we'd signed the lease and we'd moved in and started a school. And I had 2 whole students during the day and 4 students at night, and off we went. So to make it work, I moved in upstairs. So it's got 3 floors, moved in upstairs, taught on the middle floor and in the basement. I mean, a few of you here that have been to my space, in the basement then is our workshop. This is one of those panorama photos that has been squished. It's got loads of things going on with it perspective-wise, but that's our workshop for the students at the moment. And I wonder what's on the next slide. And that's our workshop downstairs with one of my upholsterers and teachers. Oh, and the dog, because obviously I'm sometimes wondered, did I like, fabrics and textiles, or did I just want to get a dog? These are I can't remember why I started. Yes, there we are in our workshop. So from those early days, the 2 students that I had during the day, one of them was the infamous Janie, who used to train at the Community College Centre. And as you were saying, that centre is gone, as are all the other centres that Michael, I trained with, had taught at over the years. And I don't know of one now in my local area that teaches that. The community centres actually, where they teach these big space requirement courses. But nonetheless, I called up Janie, who lives down the road, and we used to have lunch sometimes, and I said, Janie, it's on. You said if ever I open a school, you'll be my first student, and she was. And it's been a little over 5 years now, and Janie's just finished a caning course with us, so she's still coming back. She lives up the road. She's an elderly lady, and she wheels her trolley with her chair on the top of it. And she says, "It's all right, darling, I can bring it on my trolley, it's fine." I go up the road and get her, obviously, to pick her up. But she was planning on wheeling a wing-backed armchair, which did take her 2 years to finish, but nonetheless, she was planning on doing that every day. But thankfully, we were able to store the furniture, actually, in the school. So one of the main things two main things that I feel were happening in this journey. The first one is about the connections and the networks that we make. And I feel really privileged to have been part of that old boy network. I wasn't part of it, it's not like they ever particularly welcomed me in, but I was definitely a face with those guys. And I worked in their workshops. They did welcome me in, they enjoyed ribbing me or whatever, but I did see how they operate. And they are connected, and they did help each other. And it was very important to them. They were highly trained at the London School of Furniture in my area. So they did know what they were doing. They were wonderful traditional upholsterers, but they still wanted to talk upholstery. Oh, how do you do it? I did it like this, you do it like that, da da da. It taught me that things change. It taught me that there isn't always the perfect way to do something. It taught me that you have to be practical, because they were all running businesses. But it also showed me some other things, that not everything is as perfect. Not everything was repeating. I wanted to be a traditional upholsterer and do everything traditional and be like those guys. But those guys were gifted their career. They were given they were plucked out of line at school at 16. They were paid on a YTS scheme, and they went and worked for bigger, well-established, brilliant firms. And then they went off and set off on their own when they've got all of their experience, when they've gone past beginner. And I realised that wasn't accessible. That wasn't going to be accessible to me, and I was going to have to make my own way. So, but nonetheless, these networks, I'm still very much in touch with those guys, and they're slowly but surely talking about retiring and closing their doors. And maybe not enough of them. They do take people on. It's a big deal taking people on. I don't want to underestimate how much of a resource it takes to actually have other people in your workshops. But to see what you see as good and carry that on and see what it is that you want to change. And we were talking earlier about how, as businesses, we have to keep taking people on. So we train people. We have, I think, 84 students at the moment, and we're very busy. We really believe in what we're doing. We believe that we're teaching people how to do the job well. We're teaching people how to take care. We're teaching them about the history and the tradition, but that we're really focused on how it's going to move forward. We really want these students of ours that do want to be upholsterers to know that there's a route, or to at least have the very best of chances. So that leads us on to not Nick and Linda, but to how we talk about our community. And I've been working on this idea that I want to take these new upholsterers, and I want to be able to give them the opportunity of working together. And I want them to enjoy their work. Isn't that just the most important thing that we're all trying to achieve? Is just enjoy what it is that we're doing every day. And for a lot of us, not all of us, but for a lot of us, that's actually working with people that we get on with really well. And so we try and make sure that all of our students, past and present, come together as much as humanly possible, and that they start making connections. And our students now are getting little studios together, they're working with one another, they're able to use past students and other parts of the upholstery network for advice and information. And what we have also done on a few occasions is kind of hothouse some students, and we wanted to see whether or not we could find a way to do this more in the future. And we've been looking at spaces where we can have 8 people in a room, just like one of our classes, where the most exquisite work is produced. Our students just do phenomenal work where all the proper things have been considered, the longevity of the work that they're doing, that it will last and outlast them, and that it will, and that it looks good, and that stylistically it will stand up, and that they're taking care on the finish and the lines, and that they're taking care on what the client's requirements are. And so they're doing that in the classroom. We could do that in a workshop and run that workshop really well to the exacting standards. So if we can find a space, which is very hard where we are, we've got 2 things going on. The space is very expensive, but there's a lot of students there, or new upholsterers there. And so they can all come together. These 2 things, the space is expensive, but lots and lots of resource. What we're hoping to do is that we can bring that together so that we can manage these new groups of people on big jobs. And when we get work in, we can have a churn and just run it like a normal workshop, but it's actually a kind of hot house for those beginner upholsterers, and that they might spend a year or 2 years in that situation. What we find, the reality is that not all of our want-to-be upholsterers are actually working full-time. They have got other commitments, or they don't want to be actually, really long days every day, 5 or 6 days a week. And that's, as long as their skills are up together, then they're still completely valuable resources. And that, again, is why a lot of us have gone into this, is because we want to be able to be flexible. And so these sorts of spaces, just like we're talking about these other collectives, these sorts of spaces are going to enable people to get the experience they need, get the support that they need, whilst learning, and then moving on. And then taking their network with them, and then those people will be taking on apprentices in the future, I would implore. So it would be part of what we talk about all the time, that as and when they get to that point where they've got knowledge to impart, that they will continue to share their knowledge and their work straight up. So that's my journey. The networks that you make here today, and the networks that you make on social media, you must utilise them. I mean, I'm really just re-emphasising, and I think it's been a really nice theme of what we're all talking about, that you are bringing all of your old skills together, and that you are developing new networks, and that you are also useful to other people as well, and that creates, you become part of their network, obviously, as well. And that's how, if we start to talk with one voice, if we start to get used to being flexible with one another, that is where we are going to really secure the future of this industry, if we're just really well connected. And then there's lots of good things that can come out of that as well. So that's my story. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Louise?
You're obviously quite it's quite interesting that you sort of got straight into the education thing. We've obviously got a...
I didn't see that coming.
For those people who are here who are teachers, it's not always easy. Yeah, so you didn't see it coming.
No, and I wouldn't have known that either. But it is really important to me, so I feel like I want to do that bit well. But
maybe it's the community feel as well, isn't it? There's obviously there's that
yes.
spirit in you.
In the same way that for some reason I was absolutely hell-bent on living as part of my business, and in a way I'm glad to be away from it now, because it is bigger and there's lots of benefits from it being bigger. But I really was in there living it. And what I've noticed actually, because we've been talking to our students over the last week about the fact that this symposium is happening and their thoughts about what their experience is, and that they have benefited hugely. Actually, we got onto this bit where everybody started sharing their stories, and I feel quite close to my students, and I heard some stories that I had not heard before about precisely why they were there. Not the kind of like, so I do this and I do that and I da-da-da-da-da, but very particularly things that had happened to them that had put them in this place, and the value of the support that they get from being with us. These close bonds that they form. I mean, this is what makes our lives, isn't it? Like, no life-work balance. This is our life and our work, and that's probably something that you hear people who maybe craft things, you hear them talking about that is their life. And I felt like very keenly the reason why I was living above my buildings, because I wasn't distinguishing between my life and my work. So it doesn't have to be like that for everybody. People can clock on and clock off, and actually we see all kinds of things in our students. It's so interesting because everybody's getting something different from it, including, by the way, our leisure students, as we call them, who aren't looking to have a career in it. The enjoyment and the friends that I've made from those people that just come to us every week for half a year, let's say, that's, I don't know, it's a testament to what we're doing, I think. Not us particularly, but the actual trade. Thank you very much. Thanks for listening.